trawlers, and they're still AAA, so Japan could take them and use them anywhere in the world. But the point is that the U.S. was able to go to Japan and say, we're going to take 2.1 trillion or 14, I think it was 14 point some trillion yen in treasuries, in real money, and we're going to replace it with IOU debt.
But what happens if Japan goes and says, well, fuck you, we're not going to listen to you anymore?
Well, they can, but they would then, the United States would...
They're not going to drop a bomb.
Treaty that was signed at World War II and go ahead and take over. Or you would see Shinzo Abe meet a mysterious, accident. It's the same reason that Merkel is, this is why a lot of these countries stood by the United States. The sanctions that were put on Russia over Ukraine, this was not done at the United Nations. The United States just simply decreed, we're doing sanctions, and Europe was sort of forced to follow through. You know why? Because NATO is held over Europe like a Damocles sword. Okay?
So what do you mean by that?
That means that, the United States could always pull out of NATO, and Europe, which doesn't have very much of a military, would be at the mercy of Russia. Or the head of the,
I see what you're
NATO.
saying, that if they, that basically, so you're saying NATO without the United States is basically just like,
Pretty much, but it gets even worse. Okay, why is France getting attacked? France has had 4 major attacks in the last 2.5 years.
Well,
military or terrorist and economic.
Let me say what I was talking about yesterday with this, and you tell me what how correct or you think I am, and what your sources and information tell you. Because what of course, I'm just speculating. But of course, this is based on the assumption that the United States controls ISIS and the CIA or whatever agency, and I'm thinking more even tighter control than I had thought before over at least the leaders. So what I was thinking, especially based upon what had happened before with Russia, that they were going to make some kind of deal with Russia or something, I looked at it as a couple things. Either it had something to do with, one, they know that the U.S. controls ISIS, and they did something that it was retaliation. I don't think that is the likely scenario, but I think it's more to bring Paris or to bring France back into kind of an alliance with the U.S., because it always seemed like France, even after 9/11, wasn't it France, the country that really didn't want to get involved, and they were always the ones who really weren't supportive and things like that.
But France has not been supportive of the United States for a long time.
So yeah, so what
after World War II, France went total socialist, and Charles de Gaulle took over. And even though France was part of NATO, we have never had a U.S. base in France, and U.S. aircraft are not allowed to fly over France.
I didn't even know that. So
Gaddafi in Libya,
he couldn't fly over France. So that even supports what I was trying to say even more, because you had Obama come out right after and say, we'll help with intelligence, we'll do this to help you, we'll do that.
Yeah, but Obama's just mouthing. See, that's what I'm saying about critically thinking. Don't listen to what these words. Don't listen to what Trump says. Don't listen to what Hillary says or Bernie Sanders.
Right. I'm not saying that that's what he's going to do, but what I'm saying is that I guess my theory, and I had a couple of them, was more that the U.S., doesn't want France making any deals with Russia. they want to bring them, have more control over them. That France, I thought, was one of those countries that wasn't, when it came to terrorism, that they were more, they didn't crack down like the other countries. So I thought it was more that type of thing.
Well, yeah, I mean, you're pretty much on the ball.
And to stop their
France is moving into Russia's camp.
So that's how I that's basically how I interpreted it. So I guess I was pretty close to what they're what's going on there, and that's a lot from getting in. Just so you know, you've been a lot of help with understanding a lot of these things and getting information. Now, I go and I'll listen to, there's a couple other radio shows out there, and there's other articles from independent people, so I'll look at that as well. But as far as understanding everything, a lot of that was from your help.
Game in this. See, here's a contradiction in terms. Why would why would the U.S. have ISIS, quote unquote, attack France, Paris like it did, to enrage France to go out and kill ISIS, which is the United States' tool? That's contradiction in terms. So the real purpose behind all this is to get France to militarily go into the region, and then the U.S. is going to pressure all the other European kings to start to not focus on ISIS, but by getting NATO forces into that region,
Assad.
Then they're going to get Assad. It's all about
Assad. Yeah, it's been about getting Assad for years now. And I mean, like I was just saying earlier, you had the thing where they tried to blame him for the chemical weapons, and they were that close to going in and bombing Syria. But now, with having Russia involved, I assume that changes the game a lot.
Well, yeah, but it's not just Russia. It's also China. It's also Iran. The boots on the ground in Syria protecting Assad is the Iranian military. Russia is in there with anti-aircraft.
Do they have a strong military, though? Like, do they? I mean, when I think of Iran's military, I didn't really think they...
Iran has a very powerful military.
They do? Okay.
Oh, God, yeah. This is why the U.S. has not attacked Iran. They put sanctions on. See, Iran is the last of the nations that they want to try to topple in the Middle East. Okay? And to get at Iran, they have to break down all the other buffer states around them.
Right.
That's why they were going after Syria. And once they take Syria, then Iran is alone. But Iran is strong enough, and the problem is that they've delayed so long, and there is now military agreements with Russia and Iran, so U.S. really can't do anything in there.
What about Lebanon, though, and Hezbollah or Hamas or whatever is running?
Yeah, but you know what? There. Those are not. They're funded and trained by Iran, but they're not solely from Iran. You got to remember, the Middle East, besides what the U.S. is doing in the Middle East has always been a cauldron between Shiite and Sunni.
Right.
Between Saudi Arabia and its Sunni allies and the Shiite nations of Iran, Syria.
Well, that was
so they have a hatred of each other.
Right, and that was one of the reasons why, people would always talk about all this terrorism and being scared and the majority of terrorism. I heard the statistics. It all happened in the Middle East. Because it's the sects of Muslims terrorizing each other.
Yeah, but it wasn't always like that. Really, sectarian terrorism like this mostly started coming after World War I, when the Ottoman Empire fell, and all of the former occupied territories in the Ottoman Empire broke into nation states. Iran only changed their name in the 1940s. It used to be Persia.
From Persia, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, because a lot of people like to use the word Persian because some people don't know that it's Iran, so they'll say, "Yeah, I'm Persian."
Yeah, Iran is simply, Iran actually changed their name to appease the Nazis. Iran means land of the Aryans.
I thought it just meant I'm like running down the street.
No, this isn't that song by Flock of Seagulls.
Oh, I didn't know that song, but
but no, Iran means land of the Aryans, and they did it to appease Hitler because the biggest enemy in the Middle East was not Germany; it was Britain.
Yeah, they were
Britain,
working.
Who owned Egypt? Who owned Palestine? Who owned all of these different places?
Wasn't it
So
Saudi?
they wanted to stand with the Nazis because they thought they could get the promise that they would boot the Brits out of North Africa and the Middle East.
Wasn't it Saudi Arabia, or maybe I'm thinking of another country? But there were countries working, the Muslims that were working for the Nazis.
Oh yeah, of course. It was all through the thing. Is just like the United States had pilots, but it wasn't the military. But we had pilots in Burma who were supporting China against Japan before we even entered the war. The Burma pilots, you can look that up. That was before we even entered the war in 1941. So we had fighters that were doing sort of volunteer missions to support one side or the other. That happens all the time in war. Matter of fact, in World War I, Britain had more soldiers from its colonies than it did actual British soldiers.
Well,
I'm talking from South Africa, from Black Africa, from India, from Australia, from New Zealand, from Canada. They had more soldiers from their colonies than they actually had British soldiers fighting in World War I.
The one thing, and I'm going to take a break in a second, but I just wanted to add this, and I don't know if you read the Creature from Jekyll Island, but
oh yeah,
and if you remember this part. Now, part of this I know for a fact is obviously true. The other part, I believe it's true, but I don't know where he got his information from. But that Wilson made a deal that it was Wilson in World War I, right? I'm not getting, that the U.S. would enter World War I because, and this part I know is true, not what I just said, but England owed J.P. Morgan money and they couldn't pay. They were missing interest payments. So I guess I'm assuming that there was some law or something that said that they couldn't give England money unless they entered the war. So that they agreed to enter the war because the first thing they did when they entered the war was loan England money. So they could loan England money so JP Morgan could get their money.
Yeah, that's a small part of it. I'm sure that was involved because one of the reasons why the Versailles Treaty was written so overhandedly against Germany is because Britain and France were bankrupt. Germany, they wanted reparations from that, and France owed money to Britain, and Britain owed tons of money to the United States.
Yeah. But I'm just saying that the whole reason that the claim there is the whole reason that the U.S. even entered World War I was for that sole purpose.
No, the reason that the United States entered World War I was primarily because Germany made mistakes. One, shooting down the Lusitania, and then finally
I know that had happened, but
the Schlieffen telegram.
But supposing
Zimmerman telegram.
But that may even just be coincidence because supposedly this agreement was made even prior to that happening. That they had.
Like I said, it's a small part of it, but the Germans were sitting there going, the U.S. is neutral.